Pattern magazines are beautiful, of course, if you like to get lost in all those lines that make no sense until they become a beautiful garment, completely wearable. I grew up having a look at my grandma's, and last year I took the step of getting one, and of course they bring so many designs that you can sew a whole wardrobe for the whole year and you won't even touch the whole of it. My first Burda I've purchased is this one from last year, from February. I've done 3 different models, the one on the front, a skirt and a dress. I had a few problems as always, but it was quite fun to do, and I thought, because I always wanted to do it, to get one of my grandmas and sew one of them. And I thought that the most logical thing to do was to start with the oldest I have, which is from August 1976. And I made a pinafore, but I made it in a summer fabric, really colorful, really bright, with a white strap, and it's a dress I wore a lot.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't the dress, it was a pair of trousers.
How can I forget? I made a pair of trousers from 1989. Yes, I did. Now they're a bit loose because I've lost weight. And after the experience of sewing with the new one and the old one, I could tell some difference I thought were quite interesting, apart from some improvements they've made to the magazine. So I thought to tell you to see what you think. If you've noticed any others, don't forget to tell me. And if you're new around here, consider subscribing. And of course, if you're afraid of cutting pattern magazines, they can be a bit tricky, but don't worry, because I'm willing to make mistakes for you, so that way you don't have to make them. So consider subscribing, I would really appreciate it. I have a few magazines here with me. The new ones I have that I bought myself is the one from February last year and the one from January this year, from this month. And from the old ones, I have the oldest I have is from 1976, and then the newest I have from my grandma's is from May 1991. And then I have another 2 just to make sure about the differences they have. I think everyone knows, it's common knowledge, that Burda is from Germany, and I just had a look on the internet and it says it started in 1949. Amazing, so long ago. And at the beginning, at least in Spain, they used to come in German, and the thing they brought in Spanish was the instructions.
Nothing else.
And then I had a look forward in time, and the one I had in Spanish first is from January 1989. The ones before that were still in German. So let me know what, if you have them in English, if you had them, whatever. One surprising thing is that they used to come in only one size per model, so if you like one model but it wasn't your size, you couldn't really do it, unless, I guess, it was something close to yours. For example, I'm a 36 and I could work with a 38 if I changed the size following the size chart, but if I liked a 44 model, it would be quite a complicating labor to do that. One thing they have kept doing is children's patterns, which is really good for the little ones in your house, but they have stopped making knitting patterns, which they had even for men. They stopped doing that, although it was there until the 90s, but after that they stopped. And one thing they had also was recipe, which were translated in the older ones in the instructions manual. They were there, and in the 90s they even had things for the house, decoration stuff, which was quite interesting, but they've stopped doing that. They even had DIY upcycling furniture stuff, but they have stopped. Nowadays the homeware projects are still sewing projects you can make, but for the house. And this as well. One easy thing to spot is the colors of the patterns. In the oldest one I have, they are red and green. In the 90s one, red and blue. And nowadays they are red, blue, black and green. And they even have some that are colored, I guess because there are more patterns and the more sizes, I mean. So I guess they have to add more colors there. And going on with the pattern sheets, they still have the same method of 2 sheets of paper, both sided, which is quite good. Before they used to go A, B, and now A goes with C and D with B, which it doesn't really matter. And one thing that hasn't changed is the way you look for your patterns in all of these lines, which is having a look at the top or bottom for the numbers you need and going up or down until you find them. Before it used to be more numbers and now they have included letters as well, I guess to make it easier. And one thing they have changed, and I really appreciate it because I wear glasses, but this is really difficult to look at, is the size of the sheet. This one, let's see if I don't make too much noise. This one is the one from 76, and this one is the one from nowadays. That's amazing. And what makes that is that you have more lines here. It's really difficult to find your pattern, whereas this one you have clear spots and you can really spot your pattern quite easily. Ah, look at that. The one from the 90s is a little bit longer than the one from the 70s, which was quite good, a bit of an improvement, but still not as big as the one from nowadays.
Let's sit down for a while. Instructions.
The instructions bit are more or less the same, they're basically the same, but they have some little details they have improved. Of course, they still tell you how to find your pattern in your pattern sheet, following the numbers and all of this. In the older one and up to the 90s, they used to tell you to mark your pattern, your size, with a felted pen, so it was easier to draw it on your pattern paper, but nowadays they don't tell you that. I know there's people who do that, but I don't like it. I think you can ruin your pattern quite easily, so I prefer just to lose my sight in it. And they obviously still tell you what the signs of all of this, the different drawings they have, and what it means. And they also explain some technical stuff in case you have any doubts. The magazine then brings the measuring table and how to measure yourself, and not in the 1976, the oldest one, they only brought the measuring table, but in the 90s and nowadays they bring a little drawing of a lady and where to take your measurements, and then the measuring table with the measurements they consider. And it's quite funny because they have changed. In the 70s, for example, in my case, I'm a 36, a UK 8, and I should have been 65 centimeters waist, but now I am 66, which doesn't really matter, but the more sizes, the more you get up on the size, they change completely. For example, a 38 is now a 40, which is interesting how it's changed. But it's interesting, and it's I just want to tell you, in case you have an older magazine and you cut your size from your nowadays size before having a look at the chart, because it will change. So just be aware of that. If you get an older magazine, or if you have one from your mom or your grandma, have a look at the chart before cutting. One thing that the magazine brings nowadays that I really like is all the models in a page, so you can have a look at the different designs, and it has the different sizes, the difficulty level, and the page you saw it in, where the pictures are. And that's another thing I hadn't realized. The ones before didn't bring any difficulty level, which is a must, I think, so you know where you're getting into. And now that we are in the instructions, one thing that hasn't changed, they still do of course, is they tell you the amount of fabric you need even in different widths. For example, if your width is 140, they tell you how much meters you need, but the same if it's 90 centimeters or if it's even wider, which is quite good and always useful. And another little thing is that they tell you the amount of fabric they need in inches, which is quite important that people who sew in inches, so that's good as well. And in the older one, because they only brought one size, they tell you the drawing you need to look for, if it's a line or little spots. Although in the new one, of course, they have to include more. It has changed the design a little bit, but it's basically the same. And one thing they didn't tell you before in the old times was what fabric to use, which is basic, I think, because fabrics change completely. You can use different fabrics in the same pattern and it will be two different garments. So that's quite important. They changed that, and in the 90s they already did that, and they do of course nowadays, but they didn't in the 1970s. The instructions haven't changed that much. They are a bit more organized, more appealing to the eye because they are divided in steps nowadays. Before they just told you everything in a row, and in the 90s they got it a bit more organized and separated by little dots, and nowadays it's numbers. You have different numbers, different steps. And one thing I noticed from last year to the one I got this January is that they bring a little square in which they have all the steps. It says for professionals. If you know how to put a sleeve in, you don't have to read all the instructions. It just says sleeves. So that's good. And for the instructions, as always, they are really short, they are really summarized, and I always have problems with something when I sew with one of these patterns, because there's always something you don't understand, because there's more technique stuff and you don't know how to do it. And what I do is that when I don't understand something, I don't keep reading it. I just go and look in my books and look on the internet, browse and see how I have to put a zip in or things like that, because I get lost in the instructions. But I think you can't really ask for more because it's just a magazine. If they were going to explain to you everything, every little detail, like a class, it will be an encyclopedia. So I think they are alright for what they are. And these are the things I've noticed after sewing an older Burda to a newer one. There are quite a few differences, and let me know down in the comments if you've enjoyed the video and if you have all the magazines to 1976, which I think it would be quite interesting to get and to try to sew. And don't forget to subscribe. I upload twice a week, and that way you don't miss anything. I would really appreciate it. And another thing, another advantage is that you can see how I make mistakes and not do them yourself, which is good as well. And I leave you a link here to other talking about sewing videos, frustrations, mental barriers, different hauls and tours, differences between Burda magazine and Patrones magazine, and all that kind of stuff. So stick around for a while. See you Monday.